Salutations, purpose seekers, and welcome to Livelihood Practice. Here, our intentions are to communicate learning by asking questions in the hopes to spark a beautiful conversation to help us heal and nurture ourselves across different livelihood realms. My name is Amy. I'm a former homeschooler, and I graduated UCLA with a personally designed interdisciplinary major studying psychological development, educational systems and pedagogy, and sociocultural change with the communications attached to these different realms. Today's question is, why be part of a community? So in a community, we truly curate a sense of belonging. And I'll link a video below why birds of a feather flock together. I really like that I put in this video why having a sense of belonging curates our sense of compassion and helps us evolve as social beings. But I'll touch a little bit about that on this video, and I'll also talk about the importance of practicing our values in our real life experiences and the quality of our communities truly making us heal ourselves and have a better quality of life. As always, I'll provide psychological tools and learning tips at the end, especially to help us just try and see how we can use these psychological tools and learning tips to help us be a part of a community and have a sense of belonging. So let's get right into it. Having a sense of belonging is so important as social beings. It's why humans have evolved the way we have. We've evolved with a sense of self to relate to others and understand others and ourselves. Now, there's beautiful research done even by this wonderful social psychologist at UCLA named Matthew Lieberman. I read in his book, which I'll have a link below, that we have curated our sense of self in this little part of our brain to allow us to relate to others and understand them. We did not curate a sense of self by accident. It's this really beautiful thing in the human consciousness that allows us to curate an identity of who we are and what kind of person we are. And that is curated by our experiences we have with others. Now, we can especially see in the mind how this is developed over time, and we have seen in application through a lot of observation and psychological development research that theory of mind, or curating an understanding of ourselves being differentiated from others, starting at around the age of 4, depending on if you have siblings and how much social interaction you tend to have in your youth. So in your youth, most especially when you're around that age of 4 years old, you're really seeing that, oh, I have a sense of self and it relates to others in this way. And this is called theory of mind. And I really love this concept, and I see it in kids like truly between the ages of 3 and 7, more or less, just depending on how these kids have been treated growing up, if they have siblings or not, and what they try and do to relate to others. And when we curate this sense of self in our brains and in our social interactions, we start really understanding the roots of compassion in humans, and most especially starting within family systems. So in our family systems, we really are getting a sense of who we are and how much compassion we can give ourselves and others depending on how our families started treating us. That's really where compassion and our sense of self is first grown. And then you're thrown into the school system or some kind of education system or community, and you start relating to your peers or friends and people who are similar within your age groups. And this is where you truly start beginning to differentiate yourself from your family and into the larger world. We forever across time, as long as we're alive, have this evolving sense of self, because time is always changing, life is always changing, and therefore how we react to life is always in flux. However, there is some consistency across time based upon our family system roots and inevitably who we surround ourselves by and grow up with. So in our communities around us, we begin to feel our sense of competency, our sense of belonging, and our sense of autonomy within these communities. Oftentimes, there are people who are in communities that they can't feel they can really leave. And this is when we can have a real look into intersectionality, which I've discussed a little bit in Birds of a Feather That Flock Together. You can tend to see what kinds of people you tend to hang around and what kinds of people that you don't hang around, and why that is the case. Now, I was born as a Gen Z, so to speak, or Generation Z, and Generation Z has always grown up with technology. They don't know of a world that hasn't had technology. This is revolutionary, being the first generation that has had complete digital access. And there has been a lot of accessibility that has allowed us to have digital access. We are now seeing that children are now being introduced to phones and having a phone at a very young age. And this is very detrimental to children's health and well-being, but that is another video within itself, because I have so much to say on that topic. But for now, we have to really understand that there is the real world and then there's the digital environment. And the second we shut off that digital environment, we are trapped or stuck within the real world. And I feel that it's becoming more and more prevalent that we have submerged these two worlds that we're in, and we don't really realize that they're completely separate in their cultural and everyday practices. In the digital realm, you can be highly interconnected with other people, and this, in a way, can allow you to feel a sense of belonging and understanding within a wider array of people, and you can have farther reach with people who may understand you that are not within your immediate community in real life. However, the second you're detached from that real world, I've met so many preteens from my tutoring experiences and even just in passing that they cannot disconnect from this digital world. And at some point, that digital world and their reality becomes submerged with what their perception is in real life. And the digital world is also curated according to our interests and what we tend to click on. So a lot of what we consume in the digital market is now really limiting our worldview. And then when that worldview is on the digital environment and also constraining our sense of idea of what the world is, it is very easy, and also in obsessively constraining us because of how much we're in the digital environment, it tends to get applied into the real world. And the real world is a lot more broad and diverse and complex than what the consumer digital market that is highly being overconsumed by not only our youth, but even by adults today. So I really want to drive in this point that our sense of community is not simply within the digital environment. My focus is trying to curate a sense of community within the real life setting, meeting people, eye contact, and face-to-face interaction. When you have this kind of interaction, it clicks on certain super synapses in the brain that can just make you truly feel understood and that you are being seen. When you're on the digital environment, you are not receiving information reacting to you. In the digital environment, you are simply consuming, observing, but never reflecting what you are being perceived as. So when the digital environment is left and you're thrown into the very complex real world, there can tend to be a lot of anxiety and confusion about what you are becoming, who you are like, and you have no idea how others are perceiving you because it's so different from what you've seen onto this digital world that you've had. So the most important thing about being a part of a community is practicing your values. And you cannot practice your values and reflect on who you are and how you relate to others in the digital environment. You practice your values in real life application, in real life situations, where you can learn who your sense of self is. You don't know what your values are until you've practiced being put in situations that have curated your value system. Once you're practicing these real life situations and who you are in these real life situations, you tend to reflect and realize that you can be guided by your values, not simply by your circumstances. In our culture today, in this special digital environment, it's really hard for us to curate our sense of values, and it's easy for us to feel that we are victim to our circumstances. And when we are victim to our circumstances, we trap ourselves within a box of being a victim. And I'll link a video below about accountability and forgiveness and why we should have accountability and forgiveness, so that this can really start building our understanding of how taking accountability of the things that we can control and understanding our feelings in relation to the things we can control and cannot control will allow us to overcome our circumstances. And this begins with accountability and then follows up with forgiveness, which is something learned and tried at every day. And it's oftentimes really easy for us to fall into this box, most especially perpetuated by the digital market, that we highly consume over time especially. And if you're a Gen Zer, then you know that this box that we've been really surrounded by through most of our lives, especially if you've had social media since you were around a teenager, it's really hard to escape this little box and really see who our sense of self is in the real world unless we really practice who we are in the real world. When we are practicing applying our values by how we treat others and the situations we encounter and how we react to them, we start realizing our sense of self. And when we curate this sense of self, we start looking for people who can understand us. And this is where we can find a sense of community. Now, on top of finding that video, Birds of a Feather That Flock Together, which is in the description below, truly finding community in who we surround ourselves by can help us build a better sense of ourselves. There is this really beautiful longitudinal study by Harvard, and it was carried out and put into a book by Robert Waldinger and Mark Schultz. They created the book The Good Life: Lessons of the World's Longest Scientific Study of Happiness. And in this book, they truly found that the healthiest and happiest individuals in this world were about the genes that were curated over time. And the good genes that were curated were by the sense of communities and relationships that these people curated in their lives. So what determined people's health and life satisfaction was the quality of their relationships. This made them live longer lives, and it passed down genes to their children about being happier people, simply because those genes were encoded by the social relationships that promoted them. So truly we can see that the relationships that we surround ourselves by can not only help us feel better, but really uplift our quality of life. I think this is such a powerful piece of knowledge that we can learn from, because it allows us to not only take a real hard look at ourselves and how we feel, but it can take us into a realm of starting to see what kinds of friends do we have around us, what kind of family do we have around us, and how much do they support us? How much does our work environment support us, and the relationships in that work environment promote our satisfaction with life and our sense of well-being? I mean, truly, the relationships that we have occupationally or professionally, personally, and any realm that you feel you have to have human interaction in, they are what not only promotes your sense of well-being, but curates your values and not even consciously, unconsciously, behind the scenes, invisibly, it is encoded into your genes and passed down. We can see that kindness spreads. So the main tools that I can provide you right now are to write down your values from your past experiences. And there might be a lot of things you're leaving out, or there might be a ton of things that you're writing down, but either way, your past experiences curate your values. See where in your values you have taken action for the things you could control versus the things that you cannot control. Where the parts of your values that allow you to be accountable to who you want to be and the people you surround yourself by. The main journal prompt is, what kind of values do you have and who do you want to be? What kinds of people are promoting these values? What situations have you encountered that have curated these values? What parts of your identity have made you you? Are there certain personal interests that you have, whether that be a hobby or simply just what you like to do in your pastime, or how you like to have relationships in your work setting? In whatever livelihood realm do you have, how does that curate your sense of identity? Write down the goals that you have for yourself for 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now. What do these goals have in common? Do these goals allow you to take accountability and action for what you do? Or do these goals tend to put constraints? Also, do these goals require you to build friendships and seek out a community? If so, then what communities do you need to be around? What kinds of people do you want to be around considering these goals? Lastly, my biggest tip is to go online. I feel that even though I've talked about this restrictive digital age box, you can go online and find that there are really a lot of communities and people seeking to have a sense of belonging, and you should seek those communities out. But the biggest tip is not to stay within the digital environment. You can connect with people in the digital environment, but the most important thing is to apply that real life conversation, real life situation to who you are because you've connected with this person. Anyways, I hope that this video could help and that it could promote you finding a sense of community. Is there anything that I said that resonated with you? Is there anything you'd like me to expand upon? I would really love any of your thoughts. I'd like to learn anything that you're interested in because this channel is for whoever is watching. Anyways, thank you for joining me, Purpose Seekers, and I'll see you in the next video.